Sophie, I know you've looked at a couple of stats and done a bit of research on how this is going to affect the UK public.
Definitely, because I think this is such a fundamental change. So, since we had pension freedoms in 2015, where people could suddenly leave their pension pots to whomever they wanted, it became a little bit of a no-brainer for a lot of our clients and friends and family to sort of keep the pension pot whole or as big as possible for as long as possible. So, I think some stats that I've read from various different sources. So, I think it's now 10,500 estates post April 27 are now going to be liable for inheritance tax purely due to pensions. Now that's quite a lot. Um, there's also going to be around 38,500 estates that are going to see an increase in their IHT, even if they were already near the thresholds, i.e., they might have been a little bit over. And to put some monetary figures on that, that means that 34,000 is what they're predicting from gov.uk, being the extra inheritance tax that estates are likely to be paying.
So just the extra average amount of IHT revenue on each estate that HMRC are going to get is over 30,000.
Yes, and I think what I would say, and I try and really drill this point home to clients, is say to them, if they've got maybe two or three children, I can sort of say to them now, especially when it comes to their pensions being part of their estate, it's almost as if they've updated their pension nominations to now have, an extra child in there, which is HMRC, because effectively HMRC is getting quite a large proportion of that pension pot if they're already likely to be there. It's also seeing a number of states being hugely impacted by that 2 million threshold for the residence nil rate band, because actually it's not unusual for people these days to have bought a house a few years ago and suddenly that house be worth, let's say, over 1 million. Then if you've got you've got some personal possessions, don't forget, because they can go up in value. You've got some cash, some investments, and your pension now, it's going to bring a lot more estates into that threshold of paying inheritance tax. And I think the projections are suggesting that by 2030, we're going to have around 9 to 10% of estates that are now going to face an inheritance tax bill, and just purely due to this pension inclusion, which is more than double what current proportions are.
So we're not just talking about the ultra wealthy anymore.
No, this is more everyday people, and it's worth bearing in mind. I've still got clients who are not going to benefit from the residence nil rate ban to the full extent because their house isn't worth 350,000. So it's sort of really important that that £1 million rule doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. And I think it's an area of a little bit of misconception, a bit like the 7 year rule with gifting and the tapering of the inheritance tax, which is sort of, I would suggest, one of the sort of most common misconceptions that people have. I think this is going to be a big bone of contention for people because it doesn't necessarily make sense unless you're familiar with it.